Happy Friday and happy Fridays with Fidelman. I'm Cheryl Fidelman, life coach, trauma healer, and writer. And I believe that unhealed trauma steals the potential of our life, and that codependence is the most obvious way in which we demonstrate our unhealed trauma in relationship with others, and most importantly, our relationship with ourselves. So, did I say the date yet? It's the last Friday in February 2020, and today's topic on Fridays with Fidelman is, where is reality? I have no idea. No. It's potentially an unanswered question. Where is reality? And I think that that question is heightened the more unhealed trauma we have. Because it's our trauma that convinces us that a certain interpretation is real. It's our trauma that convinces us that there's something that we're maybe needing in the moment that we're not getting. It's our unhealed trauma that tells us you're not safe, or you need protection, or you need to pull away, or you need to lean in, or you need to be angry. So it's our unhealed trauma that I am going to say creates our point of view in most moments and in most situations. So if we're talking to somebody and they're talking through the point of view and interpretation of their unhealed trauma, and I'm talking through the point of view and interpretation of my unhealed trauma, and we think we're having an actual conversation, whether the conversation feels comfortable or whether or not it feels like it's working or not, we still think we're having an actual conversation without checking in and going, hey, what's your point of view here? What are you interpreting? What do you think is happening here? What do you think I'm saying? What are you needing? Almost taking a break from our interpretation, checking in over there. It would be beautiful if both people can do that. Like, hey, what's going on over there with you? Then it would be possible to check in and see, is there even an objective truth here? Is there something to point to, or are we both just pointing to what our trauma is telling us? I'm not safe, no, I'm not safe, no, I'm not safe, no, I'm not safe. Is that an actual conversation? Also, I think this happens a lot with family members, siblings, or parents. When we have an experience where when we're with our parents and our nervous system just completely blows out, right? Like it's out of regulation because we need acceptance, or we need to not show a certain side of ourselves. This may happen with our parents. This also may happen with other people when we don't even realize we're projecting our relationship with our parents onto other people. We need to be seen. We need to be understood. We're assuming that the person we're with doesn't see us and doesn't understand us. And so our interpretation through our unhealed trauma is going, I need to be seen and I need to be understood, which you might not need. But your unhealed trauma is telling you what it thinks you need in the moment, because it's seeking for protection, validation. And then the other person is doing the same. And you know what's interesting is so in my work, which I've said many, many times, the foundational piece of my work, which is the foundational piece of any trauma healing path, is to distinguish your unique specific default psychology, also known as your traumatic identity. So if your traumatic identity is undistinguished and it's telling you how to protect yourself in a moment because it's perceiving that it needs protection, it's also perceiving that it's right. It's right about what's happening over here with you, and it's right about what the other person is doing to you. And it's right about how you're judging the other person. So oftentimes we're not even talking to the person we're talking to because we don't even exactly know who they are. We're just talking to how we're judging them to be. And I think, according to my work as a trauma healer, to really know who it is that you're talking to, check in with them and ask them about their childhood. In any conversation, in any given moment, what was your childhood like? What happened to you? Did something big, huge, and scary happen to you? Did something, was it an overt trauma? Was it a covert trauma? How do you interpret the world? Especially when you're in intimate relationship with people, or if you have a roommate, or if it's a family member. These are or even a boss, although checking in with your boss's childhood trauma, that culture at a company is probably pretty rare. But these are the types of relationships that are these kind of enmeshed relationships that trigger our childhood trauma, and we don't check in with the other person. What happened to you? That way, when you know what happened to somebody, you know what is coloring their point of view and their interpretation. And for oneself, which is the most important, dig into what happened to you so that you know what is coloring your interpretation and your point of view in a moment as well. Where is your reality? What are you thinking is real? What needs are you looking to have met in a moment because you think you really need that thing and you probably don't need that thing? Also, on the basis of my work, which is the attunement practice, it's a trauma healing practice, and the slogan, if you will, or subtitle is feeling without thinking. Because I train people how to feel without having a cognitive interpretation to their feeling. So if you're thinking, I'm going to put out there the suggestion that you're probably not in reality. Because when our cognition gets triggered, I call it a traumatic cognitive series, which means that you have a thought, I'm just making it up. You have a thought like, oh, this person's, their tone is a little bit off. The second thought is, oh, maybe they don't like me. The third thought is like, maybe I need to protect myself if they don't like me. And then the third thought is like, maybe now I don't like them and I'll find reasons why I don't like them. And then it's like the thoughts are like a domino effect. And you're sucked into a tornado of your mind. You're out of reality. You're out of the moment. If your mind is spinning, then grab onto the question, where is the reality? Grab onto that question. I would have that question sort of dangling in your mind so you can grab it at any moment of the day. Where is the reality here? The reality, the only thing that's ever real is what you're feeling. So when you're spinning and you're thinking, can you notice what you're feeling? Because once you get trapped in your brain, the senses go away. What are you hearing? Sounds. Is there anywhere where you can feel the air touching your skin? What do you feel inside your body? What do your feet feel like? What does the bottom of your feet feel like? What does the arch of your foot feel like? These are the only things that are real. Nobody can argue that you're physically and sensorially feeling the feeling that you're feeling. And I think that it's very, very humble to really look at consistently your own reality. To really look at how are you interpreting the world, and how is that interpretation of the world reflective of your unhealed trauma? Now, here's the sort of catch in that, right? As codependents, sometimes, so many different ways to demonstrate codependence. I'm just pointing to one. Sometimes we so want to please so bad that we'll almost overly look at ourselves. How can I find every single angle that this might be my fault, right? Even if you're so obviously being impacted by somebody else who's not putting any words or noticing to their operations or their behaviors, you'll still even take responsibility for something, for some what feels like somebody else's righteousness, right? Like, well, they must be right. A big symptom of people pleasing is looking for all the ways in which we did it wrong, because everybody else has this sort of like superiority or righteousness over me. So we constantly want to keep looking at where is the reality in the situation, and if I can't find the reality, then I'm going to check in with even the person that I'm talking to. Let me just check in and see what you think is real here, because maybe I'm misinterpreting what you're interpreting. Maybe I'm misinterpreting your point of view. I'm not just misinterpreting my own point of view through the lens of my unhealed trauma. I'm actually projecting what I think that you're thinking, and then I'm talking to you as if I know what you're thinking. And then also, if we feel something from somebody, like, oh, I feel insulted or I feel afraid, then we have this feeling, and then we think that they must be insulting me if I feel insulted. Not always the case, right? So you may be interpreting what's happening through the lens of your unhealed trauma and feel insulted. That doesn't necessarily mean that somebody that you're with is insulting you. So where is reality? Is there an objective reality in every situation? Is there an objective reality in just a small fraction of situations? And how can we really be so deeply, purely, and humbly honest in every situation and say, I am actually, I'm adding interpretation here. I am adding interpretation here. And not just with another person, with your own thoughts. How much are we thinking to ourselves and talking to ourselves, adding constant interpretation? How can we tell where the interpretation starts and ends, and then where some objective reality starts and ends? Well, the more you know yourself, and the more you know your unhealed trauma, and the more you know your default psychology and the things your default psychology is constantly telling you, then you can distinguish between, oh, that's my default, that's my trauma, here's my true nature. And then inside of your true nature, there's actually so much less knowing. It's almost like there's so much less reality. There's somebody at my door, 1 second. Okay, I'm back. So I would even go so far as to say the unhealed trauma tells us that things are real. This is real, my interpretation is real. The more right you are, it's probably a result of your unhealed trauma telling you something, of your default telling you something. Because for the most part, our true nature doesn't actually have to know all that much. Our true nature isn't looking for what is real here, who's right here, how do I get my need met here. Our true nature isn't going, silence yourself, repress yourself. Our true nature isn't telling us to, conform or question or protect. Our true nature is instinctual, intuitive, aware, curious, compassionate, curious about somebody else's world, compassionate about somebody else's world. And these are almost like, identityless, right? So if we were all sitting in our true nature, we would all have so much more in common. So where is reality is the question posed and the topic of this video. The answer is it's potentially an unanswerable question, and your true nature will steer you closer to what feels like the most aligned and real experience of life. Our unhealed trauma will take us so far away from reality and convince us that it's real. Our default psychology and our traumatic identity is so righteous about ourselves and so righteous about others. And it's only to protect you. It's only providing you with the illusion of reality in order to protect you. And so the more we heal our trauma, the more we diffuse the illusion through which we're living moment to moment. All right, diffuse the illusion. I love that phrase. So awesome stuff. My group, Attunement group, is filling up. I have 2 groups starting at the end of March. One is an AM group, one is a PM group, to sort of fit all time zones from all over the world. So if I'm putting links below this video, if you are interested and want to know about the Attunement group, which is a 3-month program, and by the end of the program you will have your unique specific default psychology distinguished for you. And it's a 3-month program, so go ahead and book some time with me so that we can talk about it and get your questions answered and see if it's a match for us to work together. You are awesome. Be awesome on purpose. Constantly, as much as you possibly can, where is the reality here? Ask yourself, and sometimes generate the courage to ask somebody else. And the more curious we are about people, and the more we learn about people's childhoods, the more we actually know who we're talking to when we're talking to them. And how they're bending reality to fit their survival mechanisms from childhood. And the more we do our own inner search, the more we get to know how we are bending reality in order to survive the way we learned how to survive when we were children. It's like, it's just like constant, the bending of reality. It's constant and consistent. And the more we are able to distinguish our default psychology, live in our true nature, live life as if it's a moving meditation, then we can have more moments where the illusion is diffused, we lack survival interpretations, and we actually have like a visceral moment of being without thinking and just feeling. And being in what we've heard the phrase a million times, like actual pure presence. Which is bringing ourselves to a moment without interpretation. and being in pure presence, no matter what interpretations may be going on around us. Because it can be contagious, right? Interpretations can be contagious. All right, everybody. If you're interested in my group program and you want to chat about it, you have questions about it, please book a free consultation with me. Have an awesome weekend. Diffuse the illusion. Where is reality? You're awesome and life is now. Bye.